Let's give a round of applause for Celia La.
Hi, I'm Celia La, and I work at Khan Academy, and I'll be talking about scaling an education platform for millions of learners worldwide. So 10 years ago, our founder, Sal Khan, had a cousin, Nadia, who was struggling in math. And so he offered to tutor her for free. And story of this free tutoring quickly spread to his friends and family, and so they jumped on board to get some help. And so in order to meet this demand, he decided to put his tutoring on YouTube as videos. Fast forward 10 years to the present, Khan Academy has now become a wealth of educational content. So now it's not just Sal doing videos anymore, but now we have a content team making not just videos, but also exercises and articles, and not just in math, but also science, art, history, economics, computer science. And we also have test prep, so AP Calculus and World History, and also SAT. And all of this is 100% free. But the mission of our nonprofit is threefold. So not only to provide this wealth of educational content, and not only to provide it for free, but also for anyone, anywhere. And so my talk, I'm going to focus on the anyone, anywhere part. Specifically, how do we bring our content to learners worldwide? So first, I'll talk about our content and translation process. And then I'll dive into one of the biggest challenges we recently had. And then lastly, how do we go about solving it? So first, I mentioned we have the videos, exercises, and articles. So all that is organized in what we call our content tree. And so at the very top, we have our topics of science, math, and arts. And you can keep clicking into topics to get finally into the actual content itself. And so this is all hierarchical. And in this example, we have one for third grade fractions. And so just to talk through how we get this content into our sites. Let's say we want to publish a new topic, so third grade. We click the publish button. And then all of a sudden, this becomes live on our English site. And at the same time, all the new strings that derive from the new topic get extracted to this file. And then we upload that into Crowdin, which is a third-party service that we use to manage translations. And now we have volunteers from all over the world that are so excited about Khan Academy that they want to translate English into their English version of Khan Academy into their native language. And so they go to Crowdin, and they're able to translate the new topic, third grade, into their local language. And so this translation can take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, but once it's done, now we have a mapping of English string to the translation in their native language. And so here in this example, we have one that goes into Spanish and French. But let's say that we have a community that hasn't yet translated yet. So what do we do for that? What do we do for new topics that don't yet have a mapping? So if we go back to our content interface, we see that for a third grade example, at the bottom, we have a section called listed locales. And so we'll show or hide topics until they're 100% translated into the language. And so that means that for English, we always have all the subjects available, but then perhaps we have fewer subjects available, and then we show them when they're 100% translated. But what happens if content changes for topics that are already live? We can't hide them because they're already out there. And so taking the same example that we did for third grade, let's say that now we want to spell out third grade. And so we upload this string up to Crowdin, but we don't have a mapping yet for the localized language, which means we have English interspersed into the localized sites. So imagine that you're a learner on Khan Academy. You're trying to take a quiz, and you can't understand how to pick the right answer because you see a language that you don't understand. Also imagine that you're a teacher trying to make lesson plans off of Khan Academy. And so you make lesson plans out a few weeks in advance, and then come day of, you go to the site, you go to the curriculum, and now it's unusable because there's English interspersed. Also, this was a source of frustration for our translator community, who has worked really hard. They're very passionate about Khan Academy. They want to bring it to their native language, and yet they feel like they couldn't rid themselves of English. And so this was a huge problem that we wanted to solve. Namely, how do we remove all the English from our localized sites? Now, we knew this wasn't going to be easy. And in fact, this took us 6 months to solve because the solution was to change the underlying way that we worked our content workflow in our infrastructure. In addition to that, we need to also support it with our dashboards for our content creators and our translation communities. So diving into the problem at the infrastructural level, the problem was that all the sites were using the same content tree. So here in our example, if we keep publishing new content, and then we're uploading the strings to Crowdin in order to translate, because all the sites were using the same content tree, that meant that the translator community did not have control over their content as to when they could publish the new translation mappings. And so the solution that we wanted to do was to pin each localized site to their own version of the content tree. And if you use Git for programming, the concept is similar to Git. And so here in our example, let's say that we publish fractions. We make a change to that. And so we have a new version of the content tree. And the strings get uploaded to CODELAND. And then let's say next week we want to make a change to the biology section, DNA replication. So now we have a new version of the content tree. And so what we wanted to do was to pin each localized site to their own version. So here we have the Spanish version. And they're translating English into their localized language. And so with this ability to pin each localized site to their own version, now they can wait to publish until mappings are 100% there. And now we want to do this with not only just 2 sites, but all the sites that we have. But the problem with this is space. So under the hood, one content tree takes up about 300 megabytes of memory. But on our server, we only have 512 megabytes of space. You can see that we have just enough space for one content tree. How are we going to fit multiple content trees? And so our problem was, how do we trim the size of our tree in order to fit multiple content trees? So I'll go into 3 key optimizations that we did in order to do this. We did many, and so I'll highlight the top 3. The first was that we moved article content from the web server into Memcache. And so taking a look at our article content, we noticed that we had 8,800 videos, so almost 3 times as many articles. But in the content tree, they were taking up roughly the same amount of space. And so why was that? It was because our videos, the actual content of our videos was hosted elsewhere on YouTube. And so what we wanted to do in order to shrink the size of our content tree was to do the same thing for our articles. Namely, take the actual content of our articles and move it into Memcache. So the savings was that we were able to trim the tree by 20%. But the trade-off, of course, is that moving into Memcache is slower. So it was about to access, to make a request in Memcache is about 3 times slower. But one extra request is not a big deal. It's negligible to the user, on the order of milliseconds. The key optimization number 2 that we did was that we decided to keep only the top 10% of our objects in memory. And so I mentioned that we have 8,800 videos and some articles. We also have exercises and topics. That counts to about 20,000 objects that we were holding in our content tree. And so looking at our history logs, we realized if we cut it down to the top 10%, that serves us well for the most part of accessing our site. And then the rest of the 90%, we moved into Memcache again. And so that saved us from the initial size of 310 megabytes down to 50 megabytes, so almost an 80% savings, which is great. The trade-off, again, is Memcache. But here we have a problem, because in the article optimization that I mentioned, that's 1 extra request to Memcache. But sometimes for our subject pages, that can take thousands of requests. And so 1 request is not a big deal, but thousands is a big deal. And so the 3rd optimization that we did was that we batch these requests. We did some analysis, and we realized that whether you fetch 1 thing or multiple things actually costs the same amount of time. And so we were able to batch these into reducing it from thousands of requests to just 10 to 20 requests to Memcache. So a huge savings. The result was success. We were able to reduce our original content tree by 80%, which meant that now we had space for 7 content trees, so all of our live sites, which meant that now we were able to pin each site to their own version of their content tree, and which ultimately meant no more interspersed English on our live sites. In conclusion, this was a huge win for our team. No more interspersed English meant that for our translator communities, now they had control over their website, and they could publish contents when they were 100% ready. But the future challenges is that, there's an elephant in the room, is that we made space for 7 of our live sites, but we have way more translations in the pipeline. And so we'll soon have to revisit this problem in the near future. But the underlying change that we made to our infrastructure, which was namely pinning each site to their own version of the content tree, means that these future changes will be much easier to tackle in the future. And when we go about solving these future challenges, we look forward to sharing them with you as we get 1 step closer to bringing the world-class education for everyone, everywhere. Thank you.